Okay, awesome. Okay, welcome everybody. This is the Female Entrepreneurship Job Research Seminar Series, and we are streaming from Bozeman, Montana, from Montana State University, from the Jake Jobs College of Business and Entrepreneurship. And our guest today is Brooke, and I'm so excited about her talk. And let's just get going. Let's start, and Brooke will tell us what we're gonna talk about.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Brooke Lahneman. I'm a visiting assistant professor here in management, and I'm going to be talking about some research more broadly, but also a couple of projects that I'm working on related to female entrepreneurs. And I have a slide at the end where I would actually love to hear people's thoughts on what is most interesting to them coming up. A little bit of a spoiler alert, I am not actually someone who focuses on female entrepreneurship. A lot of my work looks at social enterprise and alternative ways of organizing. So this was a learning experience for me to go out and see what work is, what's the current status of work in female entrepreneurship. And I have been attending this series and learning quite a bit. So I tried to fit in this topic in a way that would complement the other presentations as well. So I'll just get started. I'm going to start with this idea that we've been hearing about in these previous seminars. There's this study that I found. I think this quote sums it up well. There's a study in the European Union in 2017 that says even though there are more women than men in Europe by percentage of the population, female entrepreneurs represent only a third of the EU's self-employed. And this is something that I know we're aware of if you've been attending the entrepreneurship series here. Why don't we have more female entrepreneurs? What are their obstacles? What are their challenges? And all of those dimensions. We know that for a lot of cases, I mean, COVID really clearly demonstrated this, that women who are parents share dual responsibilities at work and at home. Single women seek a lot of, they have a sole career, they seek stability. So those are some reasons. And I'll get into a couple more in a minute. But for those women that do become entrepreneurs, one of the things we know, an interesting report by the World Bank just highlighted this, that they have greater challenges in accessing knowledge networks and by association resources. Not just informational resources, but all kinds of resources. So that's what I'm going to talk around that today. Something else that's really interesting, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to talk to the crowd, or I was excited to talk to the crowd today, is that what we kind of know and have known is female entrepreneurship might be of a different nature than traditional for-profit entrepreneurship, which is what on most research has been conducted. So there's this study from the 1980s, way back, that introduces this idea that female entrepreneurship might be different. It was in the Academy of Management Review, so a conceptual paper discussing why they're theorizing that female entrepreneurship might be a little bit different in nature and character. And then I searched and searched, and I didn't find very much research until 2016. And there's another conceptual review article talking about, hey, we should do more research on female entrepreneurship and the nature and character of the types of enterprise they start and they're seeking to start. So 2016. So I just found kind of a dearth of research on this topic, on the character of female entrepreneurship. Some analogs that are brought up and that I see very strongly are social enterprise, family-owned businesses, and the challenges that small and medium enterprise face anyway. So I'm going to dive into those topics more in this talk. What can we learn from those other fields that will help us understand the challenges that female entrepreneurs are facing, given the types of ventures they're starting. So also in my searching, I came across a little bit. I was originally searching for, what's the current thought on female entrepreneurship and, where they're getting their information. That was the original title of this today's talk. And business school came up, and how fitting because we're all in business school. So some work again from the 1980s found that women entrepreneurs tended to have stronger backgrounds in finance. And interestingly, that is still the case. We're finding those correlations. But there's a problem there that historically, less women earn degrees in finance versus other business disciplines. We do see that women in finance programs and entry-level jobs are increasing. So there are improvements there. And so if that correlation still stands, then that is being improved. That relationship is being improved. It is interesting to see in this McKinsey report that, and this is finance jobs, I'll tie this into entrepreneurship here in a minute, but that in 2021, you certainly see a lot of women in entry-level jobs. That's the top half of these graphs, but it declines as you move up in the ranks. And while white men increase as you go up the ranks. So I believe this is, percent of total. So, we still have these funny relationships between backgrounds in finance, women entrepreneurs, and then, women in the financial profession. Just where I'm going with this is what we're also finding is the women that are entering finance currently are actually the higher proportion of people involved in sustainable investing. So we've had this environmental, social, and governance movement, ESG. And so the women in finance who are entering that workforce now and enrolling in finance programs is they're driving this movement towards sustainable investing. So this, for those of you who haven't heard of it, ESG is emphasizing making a difference as much as making money. So some of the issues that they're investing in are, climate change and human rights, affordable healthcare, renewable energy, and investment options that directly address a variety of social, environmental, and ethical concerns. And this was introduced in the 1970s. It now today comprises more than $30 trillion annually in global assets. So the other thing that women in finance are doing are driving diversity, equity, and inclusion programs in the workplace. DEI is the acronym most of us know. And they do this because women are more prone or more motivated to provide emotional support to colleagues in the workplace. This McKinsey report is very interesting in quantifying a lot of this. But this, maybe explains some of the women not pursuing, promotions in these jobs. It increases their invisible workload, opportunity cost of other things, but it also motivates women to stay in the workplace. It's this idea that a rising tide lifts all boats. If we make this profession and this workplace better for others, I feel good about this invisible workload. So this is just information from finance. If a lot of women who become entrepreneurs, tend to have a background in finance, it's interesting to look at the trends going on in that world. And what's even more interesting to me is that we see correlations with these types of movements in female entrepreneurship. So in the World Bank's most recent report, they said that, hey, the number of female entrepreneurs, it is increasing globally. What's really interesting is that female entrepreneurs make significant contributions to economic growth. And the word that stood out to me, the phrase is poverty reduction around the world. And then this report, still talks about the things that we've been learning about in this series. Women entrepreneurs continue to face huge obstacles: lack of capital, strict social constraints, limited time and skill. This, when we look at female entrepreneurship and the character of it, and obstacles to it, again, we return to this educational background. Maybe one way to do this, we don't really know the directionality of this relationship. Is it that we need more women to go into finance, or is it that um, you know, other skills would actually be just as helpful, but we just don't know what those are as much. But finance and other business or STEM related fields related to innovation have been shown to be related to women becoming entrepreneurs, and those are generally, on average, we have a lower proportion of women in those fields. So that's interesting to think about. A lack of access to traditional entrepreneurial resource networks. Last week's seminar talked a lot about that. And just a couple of notes there, back to finances, we do see that venture capital firms with female partners are more likely to invest in women-run startups. That's maybe not surprising. What is surprising is that only accounts for 6% of US firms. So, we start to think, okay, is that the VCs don't, how many VCs have female partners? Is it a very small percentage of VCs? Is it that women entrepreneurs tend to not go to VCs? There's a lot of opportunity in that relationship, which I'd like to revisit at the end of this presentation. But there's maybe a couple of moving parts in that, and when we talk about traditional entrepreneurial networks. And then a robust support network is essential for entrepreneurial success. It's no surprise that 48% of female founders report that a lack of available advisors and mentors limits their professional growth. So we'll also revisit that in the end. When we think about support network, that was talked about in the last presentation as well. And, thinking about who are going to be the most supportive of female founders, even then less than 50%, about 50% said that they don't have available advisors. So these traditional resource networks that we think of, in terms of funding and information, we know that female entrepreneurs have more obstacles in those areas. What's also interesting is that we have a lot of research showing that female entrepreneurs tend to actually operate in more non-traditional sectors and open companies of maybe less mainstream company types. So, for instance, this paper showed Bardassi et al. Female entrepreneurs are more likely to operate smaller businesses in local sectors. So those are not the type of companies typically that would go seek venture capital funding. So, they may seek information and resources from different parties, and their network needs might look very different than what we consider to be the traditional entrepreneurship networks. We also see that in many countries around the world, women are much more involved in businesses with a social impact than in traditional companies, like profit maximizing companies. In several European countries, social enterprise have more women leaders than any other kind of enterprise. And we also see Ashoka is a really well-known social impact venture group. And they say, while initiatives run by men tend to span wider regions and accrue larger revenues, female-led initiatives tend to focus more on influencing cultural norms and patterns of behavior within specific communities. These types of initiatives scale up and scale deep, impacting laws, policies, ideas, and values toward institutional change. So it seems that, maybe one of the gaps in our research on female enterprise and where, what kinds of information are actually useful to female entrepreneurs is the character of the types of ventures they're starting up. They might be different than what a lot of the traditional entrepreneurship literature has studied, which are profit maximizing ventures. A lot of the research looks at high growth ventures, and those seeking venture capital or other types of big funding. So we are beginning to realize that they do face challenges starting up and accessing resources, and maybe one of these gaps is because we're not characterizing female-led ventures in the right way. Some of these obstacles for the types of ventures women want to start up. And again, I'm just recapping in case you weren't here for the series, the past few weeks, but also to contextualize the discussion. Women do face more gender bias and institutional sexism in terms of accessing resources and information. This first quote is by an investment banker, and he says, for instance, oh, I think I changed my quote clearly. Well, there was a really cool quote by a male investor who said that his wife, like there were some reasons why when his wife went to start her venture, he was shocked by the amount of obstacles that she faced. Whereas, he knows lots of male entrepreneurs who didn't face those same types of obstacles. So, for instance, in a recent survey by the UK Business Angels Association, found that while 20% of female angel investors had backed between 3 and 10 women, only a tiny number of male investors had done the same. So again, we go back to this, well, how many, that's a percent, 20% of female angel investors. What percent are they of the total, all of the angel investors, regardless of gender? Are women in the type of, starting the types of ventures that would seek out angel investing? Financial resources more generally, social enterprise, if that's the kind of company that women are more likely to open, well, they have their whole host of challenges. One of those is legitimacy in a market-based economy. So in addition to being driven by self-interest and pro-social motivations, women social entrepreneurs also seek to develop alternative business models. Where social mission is central, women are likely to feel successful in meeting their social aim. However, there's a strong negative relationship between self-interested motivations and revenue. So this is a paper on women, female social entrepreneurs, and talks about how a lot of, this idea that a lot of women will open social enterprise and face unique challenges because of that. And then knowledge resources, social enterprise, if that's more the type of company that female entrepreneurs are opening, they need different kinds of knowledge. They have different business models than traditional ventures do. And so they need help. They need information and resources to help them navigate different kinds of challenges. So mission drift, they have a social impact mission with a for-profit business model. How do you navigate that? How do you stay on mission? How do you deliver on your social mission while competing in a profit maximizing marketplace? And then relational resources. Female-led and social enterprise need socio-emotional support to persevere with non-traditional business models and often long-term missions. So social enterprise tend to have a longer time span put on how they consider and measure profit. If they have a social mission based on improving poverty in a community, that's going to take a few more years to even start to see the results. They're definitely not going to be able to report on that quarterly. So I'm working on a paper in that area that I'll just briefly highlight in a bit. And then Yatim in 2008 talked about these socio-emotional support as well. So just some maybe different kinds of resources and information that female entrepreneurs need, depending on the type of entrepreneurship they're starting. So I did want to share one paper that I co-authored, we just had published in the Journal of Business Venturing. And this didn't look at female entrepreneurs specifically, but it did look at social enterprise. And we looked at where social enterprise were locating and why. And so we started with a observation that if you look at this map, the bars, the higher the columns, the more social enterprise are located in that particular metropolitan statistical area. So a city or a county or something like that. And what's interesting is the green says that the MSA is in the top 20 for hybrids and in the top 20 for population. MSA, the blue is MSA is in the top 20 for hybrids, but not in the top 20 for population. And MSA says it's not in the top 20 for hybrids, it is in the top 20 for population. So we were noticing basically if you look at the green, we have a couple of large cities that pop. So Boston, Baltimore, Denver, San Francisco. High in population, big urban areas also have a lot of um, hybrid companies. Hybrid companies is a mean social enterprise. It's the same term, same meaning, different word. Um, what's really interesting is we see the black ones, Miami, Tampa, New York, Philadelphia, Phoenix, San Diego, Los Angeles, and Seattle. Those are major urban areas in terms of population, but they do not have a high clustering of hybrid companies or social enterprise. What is really cool is when we look at the blue cities, the blue towns, and we see that there's actually quite a few of those. Those are in the top 20 for number of social enterprise, but those are not very populous places, for the most part. So Eugene, Oregon, where I lived before coming here, it's a town of about 150,000 people, and that has a lot of social enterprise. Bellingham, Washington is the size of Bozeman or smaller, and they're one of the top places. Burlington, Vermont, Charlottesville, Virginia, Flagstaff, Arizona. So it just kind of caught our attention as to saying that, these social enterprise are clustering in places where the typical clustering mechanisms would not predict. So what's going on here? And we found that there were these different mechanisms, basically, that social enterprise need, um, the kind of supportive community that will be a place where they can get the right kinds of resources and get the right kind of information are different than traditional profit maximizing ventures. So a level in collectivism, high level of collectivism in a community increases the number of social enterprise. Basically, this is a sociocultural concept. It's a value we were able to measure in these communities, that people see themselves as cohesive members of the community. And so social enterprise frequently have missions that are local in nature and find support from more socioculturally cohesive communities. And that's, from what I know of female entrepreneurship, if women entrepreneurs tend to open smaller, more locally based companies, then that might also apply. We also saw that a more liberal political orientation increases the number of social enterprise. And this is mainly because the literature says that a more liberal political orientation, very, very generally, we're talking in like big averages here and generally, just says that there's a more openness to different kinds of organizing, basically. So if you're going to have a social impact type of venture, that might be more accepted in that kind of community as legitimate. We also see that a munificent third sector in a community increases the number of social enterprise. So basically a strong nonprofit sector in a community. And what we think is it kind of paves the way for the community members to see that those types of missions are valuable to that community. So when a social enterprise or impact-driven venture opens in that community, they're already familiar with that, and they say, yes, that's great, we need more of this. And they don't challenge the legitimacy of a social or impact-focused company. The next two the next ones are kind of similar to what we know about traditional ventures, but they're just slightly different. And correspond actually to what I've been hearing in some of the previous seminar sessions. So localized knowledge spillovers in the community increases the number of social enterprise. This is very well known in the broader entrepreneurship literature. Usually it's industry specific knowledge. So it's, if you're a textile manufacturing firm, this is, you locate in a place where there are other textile manufacturing firms, and then you have access to their knowledge on how to improve your processes, how to make your manufacturing more efficient, et cetera. You have access to a labor pool. Well, what's interesting here is that social enterprise and impact-driven ventures are cross-industry. They're not specific to any industry, but knowledge spillovers about impact-driven business models do help. So that's the knowledge and information that's being passed back and forth is about how to run an alternative business model that doesn't necessarily maximize profit, but also generates value for the environment and society. We also see that impact-focused networking organizations increase the number of social enterprise. That's, should be pretty straightforward. It directly links impact-driven entrepreneurs to one another, and they learn, from each other. And I have another slide on that actually, because that is pretty important. And then more impact-focused investors. That's one of those hurdles that any impact-driven firm, whether it's run by a man or a woman or anybody of any gender, would face. So having angel investors or venture capital firm or whoever it is that care about impact-driven ventures, be available for funding is really important. So more about impact-focused networking organizations. Just in a paper that I'm working on with Jennifer Irwin on B Corp, it's interesting to think about impact-driven certifications as a potential kind of networking organization and source of information for entrepreneurs, particularly those entrepreneurs struggling with alternative business models, social missions, etc. So what's interesting is this is a qualitative study, and a lot of people reported that they face a lot of tension in their business model in having this impact, but also generating a profit, and being a part of their community internally. They just feel like it's really hard to make decisions with trying to balance those aspects of their business model. And so they talked about legitimacy to themselves. And they said that by joining this B Corp certification, which is an impact-driven business model certification, that any discomfort between that tension disappeared, because it became abundantly clear that actually the more profitable and successful they were, the more they could deliver on their community impact mission, and vice versa. And this learning aspect came up very loud and clear as well, that joining this certification wasn't just getting a stamp saying we are B Corp certified, but it connected them in with other entrepreneurs trying to do the same thing, regardless of what industry they're in, so they could learn about how to have an organizational culture that set them up to do business as a force for good, and broader community awareness, because they're meeting other business owners, but they're also just meeting other community members. So that really has allowed them to hone in on what their values are and how they can operate in alignment with that. And of course, what's really interesting is, we know that for female entrepreneurs, access to knowledge networks and resource networks are challenging. And so by getting that stamp, saying that somebody else has looked at my business model and we are having an impact, somebody has said we are, you attract the right kind of investors, and you actually also attract the right kind of employees who will help keep your venture going and going strong. And then this theme of socio-emotional support also came up, as we've seen from other studies on female entrepreneurship. There's this big support from them, being a part of this group. It's like swimming in the middle of an ocean and being around other people swimming around us, which is emotional support in a way. So it's like, I'm not alone in this. I'm doing this hard thing, and I'm not alone. And that was what this entrepreneur really needed. And then, again, this learning theme of learning what you can be doing better, how you can actually enact an alignment between an impact-focused mission and a profit-based model. And then the last paper we're working on in this stream is based on this ecosystem view, and that's actually where I'd like to end the talk and see what you all think is, we're finding with social enterprise and impact-driven ventures that who they're, existing with basically matters quite a bit. So who and what other types of firms that are operating in the area, they tend to affect the vitality of impact-driven ventures in that area. So we see that more nonprofits in an ecosystem, the more social enterprise. We saw that in our first JBV paper. So that's replicated here. But, what's interesting is the nature of the venture's mission and impact matters as well. So there's more complexity. We're looking at it in terms of environmentally focused impact or socially focused impact, and we had a way of qualifying those. But we see that if there's both higher local, like traditional venture, like it's a really like Silicon Valley, like it's a really strong traditional entrepreneurial, um, entrepreneurship activity area, and you have a lot of nonprofits, you actually have fewer social enterprise. You might think that it's, oh, there's higher local entrepreneurship activity here. So why don't we just join in with that? But actually, this is where that, like, so impact driven ventures need different kinds of information and resources. They're supported by different kinds of, contexts. So we see that they're almost like crowded out. The impact part's covered by the nonprofits, and the entrepreneurship part, like all the funding, all the knowledge networks go to the traditional ventures. And we see that this effect is actually greater for socially focused companies rather than environmentally focused companies. And our hunch is because environmentally focused companies tend to just kind of reflect basic business drivers. So, installing solar panels at a lower cost, lowers everybody's energy cost. Everybody kind of knows like, oh, this is part of my home infrastructure or whatever. And we can more easily see that as like just another venture starting up. But a socially focused enterprise, one that might seek to, improve the community, give back somehow socially, improve poverty, stuff like that. It's a little harder to see them as, in these areas where there's just a lot of traditional entrepreneurs at work. How do they fit in? Like they don't really fit in as easily. And so the resources and information, they're going to face stronger obstacles. So to kind of wrap back into female entrepreneurship, there is a call, this Al Sharif paper in 2021, which I believe is in the Small Business and Entrepreneurship Journal, talks about how we do need to know more about the context in which female entrepreneurship is unfolding, particularly the cultural context. Location matters. This paper talks about how for female entrepreneurs, similar to social enterprise, there might be different factors at work here that, what is in the community in terms of like what kinds of resources do female entrepreneurs need? Is that different than what we traditionally have thought startups need? Is the location that they're starting up matter? We obviously, like in my research with my co-authors, that comes out very loud and clear for social enterprise. So what are the implications for female entrepreneurs? And then another paper, really a cool paper, talked about, there's no work on how digital technologies could help women entrepreneurs, democratizing information sources and knowledge access. I really recommend this paper if you're interested in technology and the role of entrepreneurship. It's very interesting and puts forth a few, kind of pathways for future research. And one is that actually, one paper finds that women are actually engage in superior information search and processing. So maybe the democratization of information digitally could really be a big boost for female entrepreneurs. And the availability of abundant information the internet allows posit to provide non-trivial benefits to women that have traditionally been excluded from male-dominated entrepreneurial contexts. Again, new paper, new call for research, lots of opportunity here. So for me, based on my work in impact-driven firms and this, kind of trend that we're seeing with female entrepreneurs tending to start impact-driven ventures, there's a lot that we can learn from studying social enterprise and impact-driven firms, but tailoring that to female-led entrepreneurs and also just using it as an analog and maybe a starting place for things that we should be looking at in female entrepreneurship. And looking at this idea of would female entrepreneurs benefit from their own unique kind of ecosystem to support the types of ventures that they want to start. And maybe it's not just access to capital. Maybe it's relational resources, maybe it's socio-emotional support, Maybe it's literally the location in which they're trying to start their firm, that it's just not welcome to an impact-driven type of venture. So that's interesting to think about. But with the rise of digital technology, maybe there are ways around that. But just being aware of that, like location could matter, and for the reasons that I covered. And then, yeah, considering that more women are starting impact-driven firms, so maybe we should be considering that when we look at the type of information and resources. So I want to come back to this slide actually, and see what you all think is the most interesting to you. I think some potential avenues for research could be, how can we support women entrepreneurs and ecosystems for women entrepreneurs? How can we build up, understand the types of knowledge and access to resources that they need and build that into an ecosystem for them? Can we engage industry groups or entrepreneurship related groups to foster that? And then identifying again the types of resources and knowledge that underpin success for female entrepreneurs. Some appropriate data and methods for research that I'll suggest based on these avenues would be, maybe starting with some qualitative data type of research to uncover what are these ecosystems? What do they look like? Like for successful female entrepreneurs, what are the corollaries between the contexts in which they're operating, and what are the cultural dimensions of the place that they're located in? How is that a factor? Are they parts of groups? Are they female entrepreneurs tending to cluster in particular areas versus others? Some of these kind of big patterns we could find out. And large-scale databases of longitudinal data could help with that as well. Socio-emotional support, relationships seem to be very important resources. Talking to women entrepreneurs, but also their networks could be interesting. And again, like the types of resources that we think are important, but maybe just hearing from the female entrepreneurs, they could tell us better. And then case-based research to get started on resources and venture types. So successful stories of women entrepreneurs accessing the appropriate resources. And then, if we're really seeing this trend that women are tending to start more impact-driven enterprise, what are those implications? So I'll just leave it on this slide here. And I would love to invite comments, questions, discussion. I'm curious if any of these potential avenues for research seem the most maybe impactful or interesting to anyone in the audience. Digital context, location, geographical location, the role of entrepreneurship groups. We have the MSU Launchpad and Prospera here in Bozeman, for instance. How could we work with them to understand how to make Bozeman, a female entrepreneur, supportive place for female entrepreneurs? And then the types of resources and knowledge. Maybe even how can we improve the curriculum here at JABS? So yeah, I'm curious what you all think, or if you have questions.
Yeah, thank you so much, Brooke, for the presentation. It was really, really interesting. I really enjoyed it, and so much information, so many links between the social and female entrepreneurship. I just want to mention, I don't think I've said in the beginning, if you'd like to introduce just yourself in the chat, go ahead and do it. If you want to put your email address there, please do it so I can put you on the list for future notifications. Wonderful again presentation, Brooke. I have some questions, but before I ask mine, if anybody would like to start a discussion or have some thoughts to Brooke, go ahead. I think.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
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 Hi, it's Karen Feinberg, calling in from Boston.
Oh, hi, Karen.
The innovation ecosystem, strong. I'm from Minneapolis originally, and I have a very different model of how I guess, work with and in and across innovation. So I serve many different sectors, and I would say I'm a social innovator, but with a very different paradigm that I work with over many, many, many years. One thing that struck me is, I'm from Minneapolis, and it allowed the connectivity the CSR, corporate social responsibility, the incredible foundational giving and creative vibe there, and commitment to civic engagement and social good allowed me to do a lot of cross-pollinating across arenas. The result of that work brought me to Boston, which is a very different ecosystem, I would say, that added on more knowledge to traditional quote unquote entrepreneurship and STEM fields. So I'm grateful for that. But what I have found from going from, in general, I think entrepreneurship is sometimes it misses the point when you're trying to categorize things so much. And that's why I included that article from Stanford, Rediscovering Social Innovation. Um, and I relate to the social innovation that's featured in that article because they're not focused on social innovation is more a bridging of worlds for greater impact. So that's one thing that I want to say. The other thing that I took down in my notes in what I was reading, and I would love these slides, is what you wrote, entrepreneurial actions. And how do you teach people, not just women, but in general, and this ties into a pipeline of education. And I came to Boston to go to Harvard Graduate School of Education. So I'm part educator, part innovator, part advocate. But how do you support building that entrepreneurial mindset, which can manifest in very different ways? I think. And how do you foster that entrepreneurship mentality? Because really it is about solving challenges in the world. Um, anyway, I could go on and on and on, but and I'm a huge ecosystem person and very much relate to the cultural context and local context. So it's really interesting research that you're presenting. And I have a lot of feelings about this stuff because I don't follow a typical model of how I've worked to create impact. And I do relate to what you're talking about, the emotional support, um, because it isn't easy when you're kind of busting paradigms. Because sometimes women or in, um, or in any field, they're adopting the main construct of what something looks like. Do you know what I mean? And that includes entrepreneurship. But as you talk about, there's lots of different models to make impact. So anyway, I could go on and on and on, but that's my.
Well, thank you, Karen. Yeah, I think I'd actually be interested to hear, in terms of curriculum, or I don't know, Agnieszka, if you have other thoughts, but you know, is there a role for curriculum to teach, what you could do entrepreneurship in this way that we typically teach it, but there's also this whole other like world. So if you're thinking you would like to be an entrepreneur, but it's sort of not quite the fit for you in the way we're describing it, or the examples case examples we're providing you, but hey, you could do this impact driven entrepreneurship. I wonder if there's a role for curriculum in that, in this mindset that you're talking about. Like
So important.
there's like a range of things you could do.
Absolutely, 100%.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And then you're talking about developing countries, that's a whole other ball game around that.
Yeah, I didn't
So
go there deeply because that's a whole different, yeah, different.
yeah. And it so happened that I don't want to dominate this, but I was at my first time in Dubai, UAE, in February, and it so happened that it dovetailed with GEM, the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor Group, where I met Amanda Ilam, who will be there next week. And just thinking about all these things when I was there as well, and what does that look like? So anyway, but I'd love to connect with you, Brooke, if you're up for a chat at some point.
Yes,
And
sure.
really cool to be engaging with Montana. It's awesome. Really excited to get to know Montana, truly.
Yeah. Well,
Yep.
thank you.
And I've actually involved in the engineering network and the whole idea of how they want to install entrepreneurship mindset in engineering students. And
Absolutely.
yeah, and here it's not just moving it from, hey, starting venture to the mindset and what does it really mean to be entrepreneurial and what does it mean?
Exactly. Yeah, because not everybody's going to want to do a traditional startup,
Yeah. Yeah.
but they could be really impactful in their setting, contextual setting. So I think it all depends on how we define entrepreneurship, truly.
Yep, exactly.
So
Exactly. And
anyway, I'm going to stop, but I would love to connect with you guys, gals, um,
yeah, that would be
and
awesome.
continue to engage with. So I'll maybe send you LinkedIn invites if that's okay.
That works.
Cool.
Yeah.
Any other questions from our attendees?
Hi, Brooke. Thank you so much for this presentation today. It was very, very interesting. I have a question kind of going off the developing country conversation. When you had that map of the United States, it looked like a lot of those startup entrepreneurs were on the coastlines. Do we see any increase in research looking for not necessarily rural communities, but more engagement in entrepreneurship and support in like the center of the United States rather than just on those high density coastlines?
Yes. So we see, like, so for instance, I think that would be really good, interesting. I don't know of a lot of like
Okay.
rural community entrepreneurship. I have a sense that impact driven or community based entrepreneurship would actually be a really great fit for some of those places. We have some examples actually here in Montana of local communities getting together, starting up nonprofit organizations
Mhm.
to protect their community development. And they're trying to generate economic development through those nonprofits. But I wonder if there's a role for entrepreneurship in those settings as well, or that if there's a way that those community groups could solicit more like community-based, impact-driven ventures that would be a good fit and help kind of create that win-win to lift up those communities as well. I think that some of these, you know, some of these mechanisms that I highlighted that like support impact-driven companies, um, maybe are going to differ between rural um, places. I'm thinking liberal political orientation is one that comes to mind. Um, Maybe if there's not like a munificent, non-thriving nonprofit sector in some of these places, that people are going to say, what the heck are you trying to do with a social impact driven venture, or something like that. Or maybe there's just literally a lack of funding or something.
Mhm.
Maybe it's lonely to do business in those places, which we know female entrepreneurs can feel very lonely. So I wonder if it's a combination of things that maybe some of these community nonprofit economic development groups could help with.
Mhm.
Taking on some of these ideas and just doing that work to create this like mini ecosystem um, for impact driven and or female entrepreneurs. Because yeah, I think that those communities would benefit greatly
Right.
from some of these types of ventures. I don't know of a lot of work in that area. I don't know, maybe Agnieszka does, but yeah,
Awesome. Thank you, Brooke.
yeah.
Yeah, I actually had a question about this map. It was very interesting, I have to say. I was sure if at first, when I looked at it, that Seattle would be big, but then when you explained the colors, I'm like, I don't really, that's
Yeah,
not what I thought.
yeah.
Yeah, and I wonder if you can actually present this map based on gender. Is there data in your data set that would look at the social and gender, and if there is any um, relationship, or if we can see, yeah, any differences here?
Mm,
It's a very interesting map. I'm gonna go and get this article from you for sure.
yeah. Too. Yeah, no, it's so Suzanne Tillman at University of Montana, I think.
Uh-huh.
Um, she's our analytical guru, and I don't think I also, man, I helped collect all this data. That's a different story for a different day. I don't think we have gender or anything like that. I don't even think we have found her name. We might,
Okay.
but what you could do is the B Corp directory. I think you could gather information through that venue. We did it through the Green America Green Pages phone book, but you could do it through the B Corp company. I think they have more fine-grained data. And so you could replicate this kind of thing with that data set. We did actually a robustness check with B Corp data and found similar patterns. We just had it for like not very many years. So this goes all the way back to, I think it's like 1995. And B Corp didn't start until like 2012. So it just could be replicated. I don't think we could do that with our data set.
Okay. Yeah, I'm gonna be mindful of our time because I think we said it's 4 p.m. It's done. Yes, thank you so much, Brooke. Next week we have we're gonna learn more about the GEM study from Amanda. So inviting everyone, and thank you so much for having for being here. And if you want more information, if you want to connect with Brooke, you can email me. I'll give you contact. So thank you so much. That was really, really great. And have a wonderful
Rock on, Montana.
Yeah. Thank you, Agnieszka, for having me. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Thank you.